Welcome to another night of Vespers. As you know, our theme this week for overnight camp is Awake. And tonight we're going to be focusing on connecting to history, appreciating those who have gone before us, and we're going to meet them and connect with them through story and song. Tonight we have an amazing group of people with us. We have Z and the Bees. We have Poet Gold, the Dutchess County Poet Laureate with a powerful spoken word. We have Andres Chamorro with a beautiful Spanish song. And Mason is with us tonight. He's going to be challenging us to an action step rooted in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Olivia is going to share some thoughts about what camp means to her and what this theme of Awake means to her. And then we're going to have a chance to sing along with Britton and Meredith Riley as they're going to renew us with a song that I think you all know. And of course, the gang from the Silver Diner will be with us to bring this night to a close. So thanks for joining us. And now we're going to turn it over to Z and drumming as a way to center us and begin with tonight's Vespers.
Freedom in America. I said, freedom in America is based on economics when it should be based on a birthright. It takes America a long time to find its moral compass because it's too busy being an accomplice to fear and greed. I heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say, I have a dream. And when his lips moved, I believed. Turning the faded pages of an old Life magazine, I saw folks who looked like my mama being hosed down on the streets. I couldn't quite grasp the pain of it all, but now I'm living through the strain of it all. From Emmett Lewis Till, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, George Floyd, the terrorist no longer wears white sheets. Today, sleaze is by arrogantly amongst us in broad daylight, cloaked by our disengagement, still building institutionalized discrimination, undermining the power of the people of our great nation. Freedom in America is based on economics when it should be based on a birthright. No child is born who says, when I grow up, I want to be a drug dealer. No child is born who says, when I grow up, I want to be a meth or a crackhead. No child is born who says, when I grow up, I want to be a gangbanger. No baby girl is born who says, when I grow up, I want to sell my body to pay for my education. The incarceration of dreams, so many with promise, whose minds have become shackled by invisible chains. Steel doors shut, lock, throw away the key. I'm still fighting to be free. The NRA has a hold on we. Semi-automatic spray blood on the concrete, backdoor policies to boost the private economy. It's blatant, not a conspiracy. They say there's more murder than dead in Chicago than Afghanistan. But we don't want to see in our so-called civilized society that there are citizens still fighting to be free, fighting to be free, fighting to be free, fighting to be free for basic necessities, food, shelter, education, and jobs. This is the day, like those photos of Leonard Freed, who captured Champions 1963, the images and faces of those who still inspire me to march, to march, to march. Well, if there's going to be a dominant race, then let it be the human race. A race not enslaved by inequities or indignities. A human race. of all people, all genders, all sexual orientations, whose spirit rises like the sun, vibrant, beautiful, brilliant, and sets peacefully at night. A human race that understands one man's loss is not another man's gain. I heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say, "I have a dream," and I believed. So the march goes on. Because freedom, I said, freedom is a birthright that should never be based on economics. Freedom in America, y'all. Freedom. Oh, we want freedom. Yes, we want freedom. Oh, we want freedom. Freedom is a birthright.
Hello. I'm really happy to be here with you, sharing this wonderful song called Cambia, Todo Cambia. And basically talks about that we need to embrace change. Change is always important and beautiful. So I hope you enjoy. Cambia lo superficial, cambia lo profundo, cambia el modo de pensar, cambia todo en este mundo. Cambia el clima con los años, cambia el pastor su rebaño, y así como todo cambia, que yo cambie no es extraño. Cambia el más fino brillante, de mano en mano su brillo, cambia el nido el pajarillo, cambia el sentir un amante, cambia el rumbo el caminante, aunque esto le cause daño, y así como todo cambia, que yo cambie no es extraño. Cambia, todo cambia, cambia y todo cambia, cambia y todo cambia, cambia y todo cambia. Cambia el sol en su carrera cuando la noche subsiste, cambia la planta y se viste de verde la primavera, cambia el pelaje la fiera, cambia el cabello el anciano, y así como todo cambia, que yo cambie no es extraño. Pero no cambia mi amor, por más lejos que me encuentre, ni el recuerdo ni el dolor de mi pueblo y de mi gente. Y lo que cambió ayer tendrá que cambiar mañana, así como cambio yo en esta tierra lejana. Cambia y todo cambia, cambia y todo cambia, cambia y todo cambia, cambia y todo cambia.
Hi everybody, my name is Mason. I'm 18 years old and I'm from Seneca Falls, New York. I'm also a member of JOY. Tonight I'm going to be reading 3 different articles from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that associates with the Black Lives Matter movement in history, and then I'm going to provide an action step in association with that. So to get started with Article 4, no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery in the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. Article 3 goes on to read, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and the security of a person. And Article 7 says, all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination in violation of this declaration and against any incitement to such discrimination. So I think those are really powerful words, and I think that if they were followed, the world would be almost perfect, right? Unfortunately, they're not. And a lot of people don't see that they're not. A lot of people don't see the injustice, and that those people are sleeping on the injustice that happens in America. So one of my action steps for tonight is simply to educate yourself if you don't really know and you don't have a grounded opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement. If you don't know the why, the history, the hows, the whats, then I would say the action step for you is to simply educate yourself on the movement, what it's trying to do, what laws need to be changed, what laws discriminated against, what laws were racist in ways, stuff like that. If you don't know what stop and frisk was, if you don't know the school to prison pipeline, all that stuff, educate yourself on that, because knowledge is power. And then my second action step, because I had two tonight, is show support for the Black Lives Matter movement. It doesn't matter if you single a person out and just tell them they're doing a great job. It doesn't matter if you put up a social media post. As long as you show support for the Black Lives Matter movement, then it's going to make a difference. I think a lot of people might get discouraged because of news organizations or maybe the president's tweets who are making these peaceful protests look like terrorist groups or violent protests when they're not in actuality. Those things are discouraging people, and they will continue to discourage people. So anybody out there who wants to do this action step, I strongly encourage you to show support for the Black Lives Matter movement in any way you can. It's going to help them feel supported, it's going to make change, and it's going to help the country wake up. So that's it. Thanks for having me on here. It was
Hi everyone, I'm Olivia, and I'm going to be talking to you about a moment where I had an awakening. So, in high school and in my experience with the public school system, I didn't have the easiest of times adjusting. I grew up in a very rural area where I didn't have a lot of representation, and I didn't have a lot of people that looked like me, and I had no teachers that looked like me or were of color at all. And as someone that's now going into education, I feel like it definitely damaged how I saw myself and how I viewed school in general, and I wasn't as enthusiastic about it. So when I was looking for the next steps, going to college, going to do something that I was passionate about in a new environment, I was really looking forward to it, and I was putting a lot of emphasis on the fact that when I was out of my town, when I was out of high school, when I graduated, I would have a new beginning. And I found that, you know, I did have a fresh start, and I did have new people in my life once I did get to college, but I wasn't as motivated in the ways that I always pictured I would be when I was still in high school, looking up to future Olivia, who was going to be an activist on our campus and who was going to be outspoken on our campus. And when I was there my freshman year of college, I didn't really do any of those things, and I found myself very distracted. And it wasn't until my sophomore year that I really realized that I wasn't accomplishing any of my long-term goals of who I wanted to be and what I wanted to accomplish within the new community that I was a part of. And I realized that I was stuck. I was focusing on my school, but I was also focusing on different friendships that weren't really benefiting me in the long run, and it was a lot more drama than it ended up being worth. And I felt like I was in high school again, and I pictured I'm in a new environment, it'll be different, and I wasn't making the changes necessary within myself and within who I was friends with to actually accomplish those long-term goals. And it clicked for me my sophomore year, within the first couple weeks. And you know, I went out of my way to do research on the different clubs that were on my campus when the club expo was, when the multicultural club expo was. And I attended these club expos. I put my name out there. I added myself to a bunch of email lists for a bunch of on-campus organizations that really appealed to me. They appealed to me, and they represented what I wanted to do within my community that I was really searching for. And within the first month of that school year, I attended a club meeting for the organization, the Students of Color Coalition, and it is what it sounds like. It's a safe space for students of color on the campus of SUNY Oneonta to come together and speak about issues that they face within their own communities back home, or issues that they face within the community of Oneonta itself. And it really, it was everything that I wanted in a group. And within another month of that, they were holding elections. They were holding elections for different positions that were open, because they were really just starting to revamp the club again, because it had gone silent for a while because there wasn't a lot of people talking about it and there wasn't a lot of new members joining. And I ran for the position of secretary, and I got voted in unanimously. I got voted in unanimously by the other members that were present as well. So since about October of 2019, I've been the secretary of the Students of Color Coalition. We've done a bunch of different workshops, a bunch of different events. We hold weekly meetings every Thursday, and I'm the person that's always reaching out to the club members, telling them when things are happening. I probably have some of the most contact with the club members because of my position, and because of that, I find that I've been able to reach out to freshmen that were similar to me, and that they didn't know some of the resources that they had, and they were stuck in some of those same cycles of not really participating in the community because they didn't know where to start. And I feel like in my own way I've been able to make a big change at Oneonta, and I feel like I've been able to leave my mark on the campus, and that's something that was really important to me, being able to have an effect. When I was in high school, I didn't feel like I could have as much of an effect because there wasn't a space for me to do it. And it's about creating spaces to do the things that you believe matter. And that is when I had my awakening. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Meredith Riley and I play the violin. Today you're going to be hearing me perform with my brother, who plays the cello. We will be playing a duet of the piece Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace is a very popular Christian hymn, and it was composed in the 1700s. The piece is about redemption, forgiveness, and acceptance, and being at peace with oneself. We really hope that you'll enjoy this arrangement.
Well, it was a slow day at the diner, and everybody was just hanging around, sort of having trouble with their masks. And somebody said, "Where's Soul?" And Cookie said, "Well, actually, Soul got arrested last night as a part of the protest." So, and somebody else said, "Well, was it Skippy, the sheriff?" And Cookie said, "No, it was the town police that did it." Skippy would try to figure out how to make things work, but Skippy wasn't there. So they were all wondering about how long Soul was going to be in jail when Lucky walked up. And Lucky had his head down, and he was really sort of just kicking the ground a bit and struggling, and they could see that he was upset. And so Esperanza said, "Lucky, what's the matter?" And Lucky said, "Well, I really blew it. My dad takes me for my doctor's appointment every 2 weeks. And on the way home, Dad, on a regular basis, says, I'd like some ice cream. Would you like some ice cream?" And of course, I always want ice cream, and Dad always says, "It's my treat." And so we each get an ice cream cone. I always get bubblegum ice cream. My dad always makes a face at that. He always gets vanilla. He's sort of a boring kind of guy. But we then lick the ice cream and have a nice ride home. Well, today we're coming back home from the doctor's office, and my dad says, "I'd really like some ice cream." And I said, "Me too." And my dad said, "Well, that's great. Would you be kind enough to treat this week?" And I thought about it. And I thought about how much it costs. And then I thought about, I had been cutting grass and babysitting and earning all this money. And I didn't really think I wanted to waste it on buying some ice cream. So I said, "Well, that's all right, Dad. Actually, I don't think I want any ice cream this week." And Dad said, "Okay." And we drove on, and I was really kicking myself because my dad always gets me ice cream. And this one time I couldn't get my dad ice cream, and I felt really bad. So I finally said, "Dad, actually I do want some ice cream, and I'll be glad to treat." And my dad said, "Well, no, that's all right. We're almost home." So now I really feel like I've blown it. And Lucky started actually tearing up a little bit, and Shakira wanted to give him a hug, but she couldn't give him a hug because of the virus. So she looked at him and said, "Lucky, I think your dad will really be moved if next time you come home from the doctor's office, before he can even say anything, you say, 'Hey, Dad, I want to buy you some ice cream.'" And Lucky smiled and thought, "Okay, that'll make it better. That's what I'm going to do." And so they were smiling, and Lucky said, "Boy, I could really use ice cream right now." And Cookie said, "No, you can wait." And so they were sitting there for a while, and then Buddy and Earl got into it. They were over at another table, and again, you remember they're brothers. Buddy and Earl, though, had different fathers. Buddy's father was black, and Earl's father was white. And you'll understand why this is important in a moment. So they're getting into this debate, and Buddy says, "I just don't get it." And Earl says, "What don't you get?" And Buddy says, "I just don't get really the whole thing about why the history of black. And I mean, I don't get why we can't just not see color in each other. I don't see why we can't just all get along here. And I don't really feel any different than you." And Earl looked at Buddy, and Earl said, buddy, you know I love you. You're my brother. And I really care for you. But buddy, haven't you noticed that when you and I go out, we get treated differently sometimes? Buddy said, no, haven't really noticed that. And Earl looked at him and said, buddy, well, maybe I've noticed that a little bit. And Earl said, yes, buddy, that's it. There's just different ways that people see us and people treat us. And I just really think it's important for you and for me, for you to spend a little more time understanding the impact of this. Do it for me, buddy. And Buddy said, Earl, you know, I love you so much. And I'm gonna really focus on this. And then they ordered some ice cream, which made Lucky, 2 tables over, go, oh, Cookie, can I have some ice cream too? And Cookie said, no, Lucky, you have to wait. And Lucky went, oh, okay. And then he looked up at Shakira, and Shakira said, well, I'm getting ready to go to the march. You know, it's coming up, but I had this really interesting time yesterday with my grandmother. And Pants, who was sitting at the table, looked across at Shakira and said, oh, I had a really interesting time with my grandmother too. And Shakira said, I know that. We were sitting right next to each other, and our grandmothers were sitting right next to each other. And Lucky said, well, what happened? And Shakira said, well, you know, there was a march yesterday, and Pants and I were ready to go to the march when my mom said, go talk to your grandmother first. Say goodbye. And I said, oh, Mom, why do I, come on, I'm in a hurry. And my mom said, you need to talk to your grandmother. You need to hear something from her. And Shakira said, well, what does she know about the march? This is now. This is happening now. This is about Black Lives Matter now. And Pants said, yeah, I said the same thing. And Shakira's mom said to me, you need to talk to your grandmother too. So we both went out to the porch, and our grandmothers were there, and they were in these rocking chairs, and they were rocking back and forth, and they were, boy, they just looked so old. But, we tried to tell them, look, we're going off to a march. And my grandmother said, what march? And I said, well, you wouldn't really understand, but it's Black Lives Matter. And my grandmother just smiled at me and kept rocking. And she then said, I'm really worried about you. I'm worried about both of you getting hurt. And Pants's grandmother said, yeah, me too. I'm really concerned about that. And we both looked at her, said Pants, and said, you don't have to worry about this. We'll be all right. Everything's fine. And Pants's grandmother said, have a seat. Let us tell you about things. Did we ever tell you how we met? And Pants said, no, I just figured you met, like several centuries ago. And he went, oops. And his grandmother smiled and said, well, it wasn't several centuries ago, but it was a while back. It was back in 1962 that Gladys and I met. We were freedom riders. And Shakira said, freedom riders? What's that mean? And Shakira's grandmother said, well, we were living up here in New York, and we heard this young man named John Lewis inviting people to come down south and ride on the Greyhound bus. And he was inviting black folk and white folk to come down because at that time, down in the South, they were keeping people segregated. But the federal law said that they couldn't do that. If you were riding on a bus that was going from one state to another state, you couldn't segregate the riders because of their color. So the two of us both found ourselves at the bus station together. And we got to know each other briefly there when we got on the bus. And we were excited. We were so excited about riding on this bus and proving our point that justice could happen and the black and white folk could ride together. And wouldn't you know it, as we rode that bus, we got attacked. The whole bus got attacked. And people got all cut up and people were bloody, and we ended up in a hospital together for many, many hours. And that's where we really got to know each other and discovered that we actually lived in the next town from one another. And that's where our friendship really began, and we've been friends ever since then. Shakira and Pants looked at their grandmothers, their eyes wide open, astonished that their grandmothers could have done something like that, embarrassed that they didn't really know about the Freedom Riders. And they sort of looked down, and their grandmothers smiled and said, "Okay, you two go off to that march. It's very, very important, because we need you to continue the work that we were doing, and we were continuing the work of those that went before us. So you go seek justice, because we're all counting on it. But you be safe." Thank you for being with us tonight. I hope you have a great night and a great day at camp tomorrow. And remember, if you're going to be awake, really be awake. Good night.